One of the best books I've read all year, classic enemies to lovers fantasy trope, ... not a sweet darling, is cringy as hell. Let's go ahead and talk about the DNF I had this month. If this is one of your favorite books, you might want to skip ahead. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. My name is Tyler and today we are doing our August reading wrap up. New location today. It's really funny filming with natural light. I feel like you just run around your house trying to find where the lighting is. We are in my bedroom today, so this is feeling very intimate, but not gonna lie, I'm liking the lighting in here, so maybe I'll film in here more. Let's go ahead and hop in and talk about the books I read in August. First, gonna start with some stats. I read 10 books in total and we did have a DNF. It's been a while since we've had a DNF, but not gonna lie, I kind of feared I was gonna have to DNF this book and it ended up happening, so we'll talk about that later. For the genre breakdown, not much diversity going on. I've done much better in previous months diversifying my picks, not so much in August. We had 7 romances, 3 fantasy, and 1 nonfiction. One thing that we have to take a moment to cheer for is that I attempted to read 8 out of 8 books in my TBR. I'm counting it as 8 out of 8. One of those was a DNF, but I tried my best to get through that and I just could not physically do it. So we're counting it as completing my TBR. Average rating, I feel like this is a pretty standard average for me. 3.7 stars. Definitely a couple disappointments that I was shocked about, but also a couple 5 stars. In total for pages read, I did not count my DNF within this page count. I read 3,674 pages in total. First book I read this month was a Kindle Unlimited pick. Continuing on with the Queen's Cove series, book number 2, I read The Wrong Mr. Right by Stephanie Archer. This series follows a group of brothers. I think it's 4 different brothers. In this book, we followed Wyatt, who's like a laid-back surfer type, and then our female main character is Hannah. She is a introverted, quiet bookstore owner who's not really been putting herself out there, kind of hiding herself away from the world. She wants to get out of her comfort zone because she's about to turn 30 and she enlists Wyatt's help. And I think, direct quote, wants his help to become a hot girl. Overall, I started reading the series because I love Stephanie Archer's Vancouver Storm series. Some of the tropes we hit on with this book is friends to lovers, and then also more experienced guy, less experienced girl, kind of teaching her a few things along the way, if you know what I mean. This one is a bit spicy. I wouldn't say as spicy as the Vancouver Storm series, but a bit more spicy than some of the other books I read this month. I wouldn't say as a whole this series is as good as the Vancouver Storm series. I feel like the dirty talk in this is cringy as hell. But if you're looking for just like a silly, goofy time, these books are great. They're super quick to read, super easy to read. I probably will continue on with the series since they're just interconnected standalones following different couples. I feel like it's something if you're looking for a palette cleanser, these are really easy to add into the rotation because you don't need to massively remember what happened in the last book. You'll just see the previous couples randomly pop up here and there. But overall, this book was cute. I gave it 3.75 stars. If it wasn't on Kindle Unlimited, maybe I would be a little bit harsher with this. But if you had Kindle Unlimited, it's free. If you're interested, I would say give it a go. Next book is hands down the best book I read all month. One of the best books I've read all year, Happy Place by Emily Henry. This book, y'all. This book. I do have a reading vlog where Hunter chose my reads for a week. He started off with an absolute bang, picking this one up randomly when he had no idea what it was about. We follow a couple, Harriet and Wynn, where through a dual timeline, we watch them fall in love. And then in present day, we're seeing them fake date on a friend's holiday to hide the fact that they broke off their engagement 5 months ago. This is their last week to spend as a friend group in this summer vacation home. And because all of the friends are so connected and they met within the friendship group, they don't want to ruin the vacation by kind of ruining the mood and letting everyone know they're no longer together. What I loved about this book so much is how Emily Henry is able to put such complex emotions into a 360-page book. I couldn't believe how many emotions she elicited. Honestly, from page 3, I was already highlighting. By page 50, I already had a strong suspicion that this was going to be a 5 stars. And by page 80, I was like, this is a damn masterpiece. This is one of the best books I've ever read. I don't think I've ever highlighted a book like I've highlighted this one. I swear almost every other page I'm highlighting. There are some sections where I might as well have just highlighted the whole thing. The writing is so good. Not only discussing falling in love and relationships, but the discussions we have around friendships were some of the most heartwarming parts. It's funny how fiction can relate to reality. A lot of the discussions that happen around friendship were kind of mirroring my life at the same time, and I feel like it only made this book hit harder and made me adore and treasure this even more. So I am so grateful I read this book whenever I did. I feel like it came into my life for a reason, not to be overly dramatic, but if you have for some reason not read this book, please do. You will not regret it. Next book I read was also in the reading blog where Hunter chose my reads. He picked up this YA fantasy called Havenfall. Neither of us knew literally anything about this book, so went into this very, very blind. Our main character is Maggie, a 17-year-old who is on her way to Havenfall for the summer. Her family has a long time history of being the innkeeper at Havenfall. Therefore, she's come to Havenfall like every single summer, and it's one of her favorite places to be. Her uncle Marcus is the current innkeeper of Havenfall, and Havenfall is this kind of like safe haven between worlds, between magical realms. And the role of the innkeeper is to be somewhat of a diplomat between these realms, because Havenfall is seen as a neutral territory, and it's the innkeeper's role to assist in treaties, negotiations, difficult discussions happening between the delegates of these different worlds. Something happens and Marcus is no longer able to act as innkeeper, so Maggie in the time being takes over for the summer as innkeeper. I would probably give this book somewhere between 2.75 to 3 stars. I landed on 3 because I did feel like the ending was a bit strong, even though the plot twist that we worked up to was pretty obvious. It was interesting. And this is only a duology, so I feel like it is worth continuing on because it leaves us on a total cliffhanger. Kind of how I described this to Hunter was like, you know, in The Vampire Diaries or something, where these teenagers have all of these ridiculous problems. Most of them could be solved by a simple conversation. Do they ever have these conversations? No, because why would we do that? Why would we actually have a conversation and solve our problems? Let's handle everything on our own, make a lot of miscalculated steps, and then once everything goes wrong, then we have a discussion. It was just a little bit too obvious sometimes what the answer was, and then of course our main character was missing the whole point. I hope in the next book there's more communication going on, there's more group efforts made, so that we're not just having to deal with solely our main character being alone and not knowing how to deal with the situations that arise. Next book was a super fun Kindle Unlimited pick. I read The Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli, realizing I've never had to say that author's name before, so apologies in advance. I absolutely loved the premise of this book. Classic enemies to lovers fantasy trope. We follow a witch, Rune, and a witch hunter, Gideon. We get dual POV, which was chef's kiss in this book. I'm so glad we got to see both of their perspectives. In their world, witches were overthrown and now are hunted and killed by the current government. Gideon works for that government as a very well-known witch hunter. Rune has to hide from society that she is a witch and somewhat of a witch vigilante by night. She has a hidden identity called the Crimson Moth, who is known for intercepting and saving witches. Gideon has been chasing the Crimson Moth for 2 years. He starts getting an inclination that it could be Rune, so he starts pursuing her to try and get information, but then she starts pursuing him to get information about where a specific witch is being held. So they both start trying to pursue each other to try and secretly get information, and I'm telling you, it made the dual POV so fun to read. The enemies to lovers trope of it reminded me of Powerless, just because they were on such opposite ends. It was like, okay, how are these two ever going to be together? I did think the big reveal at the end was a bit obvious and I saw it coming from a mile away, but the ending was intense and had some shock value because there were multiple plot twists that arose. So overall, I gave it a 4 stars because I very much enjoyed it. I will certainly be continuing the series when book 2 comes out next year, and I'm curious to see what the author does with the story from there. If you like enemies to lovers, would 100% recommend this book. Next, let's go ahead and talk about the DNF I had this month. Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'm in 2 minds about this because I very rarely DNF books. This is only my 3rd DNF of the year. So if you think this book sounds interesting, I would still say to read it. The problem I had with this book is I've already read too many books like it that I didn't think I was learning anything new from it. This is a nonfiction spirituality book that reminded me a lot of a book I read a couple months ago called Feelings Buried Alive, Never Die. Ugh, it's so hard to try and put this into words. I think, okay, both books present a lot of spirituality practices, meditation, manifestation, aligning to your higher self, and more. Those are just some that I can think of off the top of my head. I think the target audience for both of these books is probably some people who are struggling with some type of illness, some type of disease, that are wanting to learn how to take a more holistic approach instead of relying on modern medicine. Both of these books really try to encourage and prove how just our mind and our mindset can heal what's going on within our bodies. Both of these books claim that people have been able to cure their cancer by not using modern medicine, solely using the spirituality techniques. This book to me literally just felt like the mansplained version of Feelings Buried Alive, Never Die. A lot of this was just so over-explained. And again, with the target audience, I think he's really writing to the skeptic. Someone who doesn't believe in spirituality practices, someone who would only trust modern medicine and really hasn't experienced or utilized these techniques before. He spends a lot of time proving why what he's saying is factual and why you should believe him. And for me, it felt somewhat like a waste of time because it was like, yeah, I already believe in this. I don't want to listen to 14 hours of you trying to prove scientifically why I should believe you. There's this big meditation and manifestation technique that he works up to towards the middle of this book that, again, he claims could cure your illnesses, but also manifest you your dream job, manifest you your dream life. Literally, guys, what he described, I literally did to a T 5 years ago on my own. So again, it just came back to like, I'm not sure what I'm gaining from this book, and this book is like way too long and chunky for me to be wasting my time on if I'm not actually gaining something new. But for instance, I had Hunter read a couple chapters about the manifestation technique to encourage him, like, hey, give it a shot, see if this works for you, because I know for a fact that it worked for me. And he's saying that it also worked for a lot of other people. So if that sounds interesting to you, and you do not have a background in spirituality, maybe pick this up. It is on Audible, so I also got it on Audible because I did not personally want to physically read all of these words. But I will let you know, he uses a lot of figures and diagrams and charts to prove his point. And within the audiobook, for instance, he would say, as you look at figure 5.3, this is what it means. If you don't have the book to reference, it could be potentially annoying just to solely rely on the audiobook, as a heads up. So that was Becoming Supernatural. On a much lighter note, final book in the reading vlog where Hunter chose my reads was Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. This is a continuation of the interconnected standalone series that starts with When in Rome. These are small town romances. This one specifically is a bit of a grumpy sunshine trope, kind of similar to that first book I talked about this month. Our main character, Annie, is very inexperienced, looking for more experience in the dating department. Will, who we get introduced to in the first book in the series, gets recommended to offer his services to teach Annie a few things and become her dating coach. One thing about Sarah Adams, for those who are not interested in spice, is so far from what I found from her books. She does closed door spicy scenes, which is a bit different from the Stephanie Archer book I mentioned previously. This book was cute. I gave it about a 3.25 stars. Why I didn't rate it higher is I could not personally relate to Annie's character at all. She's seen as this very much innocent, naive, kind of goody two-shoes vibe that needs to be protected by the whole town. Some parts of that characterization were done a bit too heavy-handed for me. So for instance, she avoids saying any cuss words. And therefore, this 30-year-old woman literally says verbatim, H-E double hockey sticks. If anyone wants to go back to middle school on that one. There's one point where she's getting mad at the male main character and she tells him that he's being a stingy butt munch, which was just so cringy to me. And then there's this part in the book going off of the small town nature. The characters in the small town are like way too involved in her life, and they make a petition to keep Will and Annie apart. And in bold letters it reads, "We the townspeople demand that Annie Walker and Will Griffin hereby forfeit their new relationship on the grounds of Annie Walker being a sweet darling and Will Griffin being ... not a sweet darling." It was just too much to me. I am absolutely fine with the plot point of the guy being more experienced than the girl. But when you turn this 30-year-old woman into a caricature of a middle schooler, I just could not emotionally relate to her at all. I did enjoy our male main character, Will. I felt like he was very likable, had emotional depth. It was really Annie that didn't do it for me in this story. And that is practice makes perfect. The next book is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter, which is a cutie little YA romance. We follow Liz, who's in her senior year of high school. Her childhood crush, Michael, moves back into town, and she enlists her enemy neighbor, Wes, to kind of be her wingman, hype her up so that she can go to prom with Michael. In an effort to make Liz seem more desirable / cooler, her and Wes start fake dating. They start spending a lot of time together, and over time they realize, hey, maybe we're not as enemy-like as we thought. Maybe we get along pretty well. One thing that's super fun about this book is each chapter starts with a movie quote. So here's a fun one from the movie 27 Dresses. Love that movie, by the way. And what I didn't know, which I talked about in my TBR video, I didn't know if these quotes would relate at all to what was actually happening in the story, but I am happy to report that they do. And it is so cute to see how they connect. So I loved all the references to some of the classic rom-com movies because Liz is just like a complete hopeless romantic. Something going on within the background of her character is that her mom passed away when she was a girl. Her mom was also a complete hopeless romantic, and they would watch all the classic rom-coms together. So whenever Liz misses her mom or wants to feel comforted, she goes back to these rom-com movies. And low-key kind of makes it her whole personality. If I was in high school, a little bit younger, I probably would have loved this because I know that so many people rate this 5 stars. For me, again, I just struggled to connect to Liz a little bit. She makes a lot of extremely selfish decisions. Throughout the book, she's honestly a pretty terrible friend. And I get that characters are flawed, and I encourage characters to be flawed because they feel more real. It felt like she was not being held to any type of standard or being held accountable for just about anything. I did love Wes. I felt like he was such a good guy, but part of my notes that I wrote down is, let's be honest, Liz was the problem here. The sequel to this book, I think it's called Nothing Like the Movies, is coming out potentially this month. I do want to read it because it's them going off to college. So I feel like a lot of areas where Liz's personality fell flat for me in this book, I hope we'll see character development in the next one. But if you enjoy a rom-com, if you're maybe a little bit younger or know someone younger, this is a very sweet and heartwarming story. I would recommend it with a 3.5 stars. I just don't think it's something that's going to stick with me, but I'm willing to see if that will change by reading the sequel. And that is Better Than the Movies. Oh boy. I feel like I'm about to hurt some feelings with this one. If this is one of your favorite books, which I know I have an unpopular opinion on, you might want to skip ahead. Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I want to preface this by saying I've read other books by Abby Jimenez and have enjoyed them. Previously, I've given a few of her books around a 4-star rating, so they're nothing life-changing for me, but they are enjoyable. Yours Truly fell so flat for me. I have not had a book make me angry like this in quite a while, and I thought this was maybe going to be a 5 stars. I don't know what happened with this book, how my opinion is just so drastically opposite from what I feel like everyone on BookTube and BookTok is saying. We follow Bree and Jacob, who are 2 doctors at the same hospital and who get off to a terrible first impression. Bree has a lot going on in her personal life. She's going through a divorce. Her brother also got diagnosed with a kidney disease and has been dealing with severe depression as well as a lot of health issues. Jacob recently transferred to the hospital where Bree works at, and his first day just goes horrendous. All of his patients die. I think it's like 7 people die. The nurses don't like him. Bree runs into him in the hallway and breaks his phone. They have a very uncomfortable first discussion together, and he ends up writing a letter to Bree, kind of explaining his anxiety, where he was coming from, and why that first conversation went so poorly. Once Bree reads the letter, she realized that she totally misjudged Jacob, was way too harsh to him, and they start building a friendship, writing these letters, which then turns into talking on Instagram, which then turns into talking on the phone, which then develops into a fake dating situation. I did enjoy this in the first half. I would say up to about 40%. I was like, okay, yeah, enjoying this. Really like Jacob's character, really like how Abby Jimenez is discussing social anxiety and how it can affect you day to day. But once we got past the 40% mark, I almost felt that Jacob's anxiety was his only personality trait, and he was so one-dimensional to me. I am through and through introverted and have a lot of social anxiety myself. It's something that I deal with every day, but it's not my entire personality. Next, and probably my biggest problem with the book, is that there is a lot of miscommunication that goes on within it. There's a miscommunication trope that exists for literally like 60% of this book. And then to add on top of it, at one point we add another miscommunication to it as well that literally almost sent me over the edge. These are supposed to be well-educated doctors in their mid-30s, and you're telling me these 2 people can't have simple conversations? I wanted to throw this book at the wall at multiple points. Don't know what else to say. This book just fell so flat for me and didn't sit right with me. I'm now very hesitant and scared to continue on with the 3rd book just for the summer, because I'm like, okay, maybe Abby Jimenez is just like not for me. Let me know in the comments. Did anyone else feel this way? Because I feel very alone in this opinion, because I swear everyone else gives this like 4 or 5 stars. That was yours truly. On a much happier note, the next book I read was Summer Romance by Annabel Monaghan? I've heard it said both ways. My only regret with this book is that I didn't annotate it. This was a 5 stars. I absolutely loved this book. We follow Allie, who's a professional organizer who wakes up one day and realizes that her life is just a complete mess. Her mom died 2 years ago. She's been struggling with depression through that. A year later, on the anniversary of her death, her husband divorced her. She hasn't worn real pants and she doesn't even know how long. And while battling all of that and motherhood alone, she goes to the dog park one day. Her dog decides to pee on a random stranger named Ethan. Ethan and Allie have an instant connection. He's very laid back, very chill, very communicative. She develops a crush very early on, and she realizes that he might be exactly what she needs. A little summer romance to help get her life back on track. That's where I'm going to leave it, but I do have to say, this book is so much more beyond just a simple little summer romance. I felt like this book was Emily Henry meets Ellen Hildebrandt. Emily Henry for the emotional depth, and then Ellen Hildebrandt for the story setup and the summer setting. Ethan is just the gold standard for men everywhere. Going back to that, he is just so communicative and encouraging of Allie meeting her own needs before everyone else's. He really encourages her to find her own voice again, stand up to those that are taking advantage of her, and take control of her life. And I feel like the author just so effortlessly told the story. It didn't ever feel like she was trying to do too much. The sentence structure is very simple, but somehow she's still able to pack an emotional punch when it feels like she isn't even trying. The only thing that could have made this book a little bit better for me is if there was some spice to it. So this is for my closed door girlies, but I knew I couldn't take away any stars just because there was a lack of spice. I loved the messaging in this book and would recommend it to anyone, especially females above 30, females who feel like they've lost their voice, or mothers as well. I love my little colorful stack here. I feel like that looks so fun. I totally am going to have to film here again because I love that you can see the books I've read so far. Next book was a Kindle read for me. This is not on Kindle Unlimited, and that is the Rom-commers by Katherine. This has to be her most recent release because this only came out a few months ago. She has quite a few books out that I would like to read. Specifically, I really want to read The Bodyguard by her, which is on Kindle Unlimited. However, this book, the Rom-commers, did fall a little bit flat for me. We follow Emma, who's an aspiring screenwriter, but she's had to place her aspirations on hold to care for her father, who needs round-the-clock caregiving attention. She gets the opportunity of a lifetime to work for one of her favorite screenwriters, Charlie Yates, because he's written a rom-com script and it's terrible. It's needing a female touch to go through and help with a rewrite. So she flies out to California for 6 weeks to help Charlie with the script and kickstart her career. The beginning of this book was so rough because once she gets to California, everything is not as it seems. And I seriously asked myself at 13% and 18%, do I just DNF here? Do I just cut my losses and stop reading here? Because our male main character, Charlie, at the beginning is so unlikable, I almost can't even put it into words. And I don't think that he ever even got a redemption arc. Even though this is a love story, the setup, the plot, it was just so far-fetched. I really didn't like our female main character either. I went on Goodreads afterwards to look at the 2-star review range, which is where I was sitting. Everyone within that range was having the exact same issues I was having with the book. And I just don't think these characters or the story made any impact on me at all, and I will probably never think of them again. So pretty brutal review for my first Katherine book. I'm sorry, but from what I hear about her other books, I think she can do better than this one. And that was the Rom-commers. Final book of the month, Kindle Unlimited read. We have The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This book was super fun to read because I buddy read it with one of my good friends. So I feel like I got to talk and theorize so much about this book while I was reading it. Our female main character is named Oraya, O-R-A-Y-A. Oraya? Not exactly sure how to say it. She is a human who gets adopted by the night-born vampire king named Vincent. And so she's this human living in a vampire world. Every 100 years they have this tournament called the Kajari, where the winner of the Kajari gets any gift they want gifted by the goddess named Nyaxia. So Vincent adopts her, trains her, all with the intention that she will enter the Kajari, win, and then be able to become a vampire and not have to live her life in fear. The Kajari is very much giving Hunger Games. This book is very similar to Powerless because we have a human entering these series of trials with all magical beings, all people that are stronger than her. So she's at very much a disadvantage. A big arc throughout this story is that we realize that Oraya has been very much sheltered and locked away within this castle and shielded from the realities of the world. Throughout the trials and having to create alliances with other contestants, she starts realizing that maybe the view of the world that she's been told isn't totally accurate. I very much enjoyed my time while reading this. It wasn't a 5 stars. Even though I would say the story is so comparable to Powerless, there were a few aspects of the plot where I just totally rolled my eyes at. There was one thing in particular where I read it and I literally just audibly groaned and was so annoyed that this was part of the plot. But otherwise, the story was really good. I do plan on continuing it. I already have the novella 6 Scorched Roses that comes after this on my September TBR. Hopefully I can get to The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King as well in September. I haven't heard great reviews about that one, so we'll see what happens. And that one isn't long. The audiobook for that is almost 20 hours long. I think it's over 600 pages, so that's a bit intimidating. But the 3rd book in the series is coming out in November, so I would rather be prepared for it and continue on because I did feel like it was a very strong start to a fantasy series. And that is The Serpent and the Wings of Night. Okay guys, we made it to the end. That was all of the books that I read in August. We had some highs and lows throughout this month, but I can't complain. I'm really happy with some of the books that I read. Next video you guys will be seeing is setting my September TBR. So make sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that YouTube stuff you guys know how to do so that you don't miss my next video. I want to say thank you for watching today's video and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye guys.